Foraging has always been a part of native lifestyle and more of indigenous people or people of survival. What really led you into trying to bring it to the mainstream?
Well, I grew up on the Pueblo. My grandfather raised cattle and was kind of more of like a ranching, farming type family. I remember this one point in my childhood walking down the road to my grandfather's house, and my mom was showing me that my grandpa used to eat the rose petals. And so I was like obsessed with just eating these rose petals, and I was a super picky eater. So the rose petals was like this kind of revelation to me, and I was showing all the other kids how to eat them, and everyone thought it was weird. And it wasn't until like years later that I realized like how important that was for me. I realized with native culture, like you don't really get food with wild ingredients anymore, but that was the food. A little bit of backstory, but I grew up on the Pueblo, but kind of disconnected because my dad kind of connected more with his Spanish roots. And so I was always in it and out of it. And so I never got to get initiated. I didn't really get to participate in all those things. And so for me, the food culture of that place is what's growing in this terrain. And so for me, foraging is really a connection to like my roots and this place and the people that I come from. And these trees are awesome. I mean, there's a few different trees here, but these yellow flowers, there's two different trees that have flowers like them. One's called the New Mexico privet, or it's kind of, they call it New Mexico olive. Oh, because it's like super bitter and kind of looks like an olive. What about saltbrush? Do you ever use saltbrush? This guy here, this like all this new growth saltbrush is cool. It's almost like a succulent, and it's really salty. It pulls out salt from the earth.
The way I've known it to be cooked is you take it and you put a little bit of fat in a pan, and then you just cook it right then and there and eat it.
Yeah, it's really nice as the ash too for like using in corn, because it's got all that salt.
My grandmother and grandfather used to have some of it, and it was one of the first experiences I had while eating.
Oh wow. I lived around the country for a while, and I realized that I needed to be back home to do what I was doing. And I'd studied cooking in like the best restaurants I could find. But when I decided to move back, the goal was kind of to make a project that was more of like a blurring of lines of lifestyle and work.
A good blend of the two.
We think of it as like an ecosystem. So like when we go foraging, we might see a different clay deposit that we've never seen before, and so I'll harvest clay and I'll use that for the ceramics that I make for the dinners. And being from Taos Pueblo, micaceous clay is a big part of our culture there. And so I dig clay from the same sort of terrain as our ancestors have for a very long time, and having the micaceous clay to serve on is really special to me. And when I fire it, I keep the carbon in the clay, so it comes out really dark black. This bowl is like a vessel for the food and the thoughts. And because it's so black, it kind of feels like a void.
I'm aware. I've been working with it my entire life.
Awesome. How cool. And so it feels like if I was on a white porcelain plate, you know, you're focusing all this attention on the way it looks. But if it's like a darker vessel, you kind of think about it a little more. And
you're not just paying attention to the food, you're paying attention to the atmosphere, the plating, where you are, where all of this comes from. It's not like asking for someone to get something from China and then brought to the Americas to serve a food that's from India.
Exactly.
You're eating all the food, everything is made here. It's a more personal, it's a better intake, it's a better story.
Exactly, yeah. This is like my favorite watercress anywhere. So different stages in their life taste different, but the crazy thing is if you went to the store and bought this would be like $8 worth of watercress or something. But like, you know, if you're connected with your surroundings, you can really find like the most delicious and nutrient dense things.
What part of this plant can you eat?
You can eat the whole thing. You know, tend to eat the stem and leaves, and when it starts to flower, it kind of tastes different. There's a few reasons for that. If you think of, you know, a plant, it's kind of like us, or kind of like anything, it's here to reproduce. When it's sprouting, it's setting all its energy up to produce, you know, a life creating plant. Then it'll flower, get pollinated, turn to seed, and then replant itself. So when it's flowering, most of its energy is going towards that. So for most plants that are like sort of like leafy like this, I'll pick it kind of at this stage when there's like a really nice stem.
Medium adult.
Yeah, exactly. But like something like osha root, which you've probably picked before and love, if you dig the root when it's going to flower, all its energy is in the flower.
Of all of the foods, plants, and animals that you foraged for, of all the locations, what would you say is your favorite thing to forage? The one that you look forward to every time you see it?
I would say my favorite thing probably is the Kota tea, Indian tea or Navajo tea or green thread, or there's a lot of different names for it, but that's the first thing I kind of picked with my mom every year. We drive around in a little geo tracker and go look for Kota, and it was always in our house, and we'd make sun tea with it in the summer. In the winter we'd have hot tea. I've never seen it anywhere else. It doesn't really seem like it has a relative. It's beautiful looking, it's a really nice flower, but it also tastes great. It's also medicinal. If you had like a French sorrel, it's like sharp and acidic and really...
It's got a good bite to it.
Yeah, it's not slimy at all. This one's the native sorrel, so it's a little different, but it's not as tart. It's a little bit more like chewy, and it's got like a slime to it. I tend to like the more inner bright green, softer looking leaves on this plant. This is cattail, and a little later in the year you can pull them out and eat like the tuber sort of like root system. And then earlier in the spring like this, you can eat these little tiny shoots, these bottom sections, like kind of wherever you could break off.
I can't describe the taste. It's real earthy, deep.
But it's interesting, if you look at any culture, I think, that has a land-based, or is a land-based people, they generally don't eat plants as much. They eat meat and fish and things like that. This is more survival food, or more of like remedios or medicine.
Yeah. As we grow as a population in the world, why do you think it is important for people to learn about foraging, about where their food comes from, about the location of what they can get where they are?
I think there's a lot to glean from the past usually, and to be an optimal human and have the most nutrition, I don't think you can avoid sort of wild foods. I used to be kind of against like large scale farming and kind of, blindly hate that, but it is pretty incredible that we can feed 8 billion people, go to a grocery store anywhere in the country and be able to have food. But I think that there is a good balance between the two, of being able to know what's around you and be able to glean some stuff from the wild, and support local farmers who are maybe raising grass-fed beef. So I think the future of the food maybe looks a little bit of like mixing the past knowledge with
the
present knowledge, not necessarily thinking one's better or worse, but kind of mixing the two.
Blending food and actual labor together with technology, do you think that would create a healthier people, or at least a people that is more aware of what is happening? How do you think it would alter if people did as you stated, small farming or supporting local farms with a mixture of foraging?
Most of the time we say large-scale farming's bad because they use glyphosate and they tear up the soil all the time, and both of those are true, but there is a way to involve large-scale farming and, say, permaculture practices of having cover crops, and your life is your medicine in a way. And if you go out and you find wild asparagus and eat them right there, then and there, the value of that is like exponential to if you just bought wild asparagus from the grocery store a week later after it was picked. And so I think being able to go out into nature, even if you're just picking watercress, breathing natural air, maybe drinking from the spring, taking your shoes off and grounding in the earth, and picking that thing with your own hands, and the intentionality that comes with that is probably even greater than the nutrition of the plant itself.